Good morning. We are starting today part 1, lesson 8 of a study of the Gospel of Matthew. Consists of the pericopes of the man with leprosy, the faith of the centurion. Jesus heals many. The cost of following Jesus. Jesus calms the storm, and the healing of 2 demon-possessed men. This is all contained in the 8th chapter of Matthew, verses 1 through 34. It's a rather dense chapter, and it took me quite a while to work out what was going on here, what Matthew intended for his readers to learn about Jesus and the nature of the kingdom, even the very nature of faith itself. So I hope and I pray to God that together I can help you hear the message that Matthew wants you to hear, so that your life will be changed as Jesus wants it changed. The man with leprosy. In this pericope, Matthew intends for his readers to perceive Jesus as revealing both the true nature of the kingdom, the rule of heaven, and the nature of his messianic kingship. He uses simple historical narrative events to make his points. In the Old Testament, leprosy and various kinds of skin diseases were used as a symbol of the consequences of sin. None of the Jews had a modern concept of infectious diseases. What really mattered to the Jews in the Old Testament was the interruption between them and their covenant God. Jesus uses this occasion to emphasize the desire of the Father to meet the needs of his people, even in the absence of any real knowledge about disease, in the absence of any understanding of infection. God still wants to meet the needs of his covenant people. I think that is important today. We modern believers sometimes think you have to be trained in science or medicine or things like this to merit, I guess would be the word, God's desire to meet your needs. But there's billions of believers on the face of the earth who don't have a clue about any of those things. And God meets their needs because he wants to. The contrast between this attitude towards sinners and that of the Jewish and religious and political leaders was stark indeed. They fled away from them. They fled, they didn't want to come close, and the very idea that Jesus again and again violated was he reached out and touched people with leprosy. He still reaches out and touches us leprous people. Our only hope is the touch of Jesus. The only thing that keeps us fully human touch Jesus. And don't you ever forget that. And I'm talking as much to myself as I am to you. Because, especially right now when I'm having increasing physical problems, I need to be reminded that Jesus still keeps me human, still keeps me in his love. Then the faith of the centurion. The contrast between Jesus and the Jewish religious and political leaders extended to the very nature of faith itself. I remember studying this and suddenly having that aha moment where I realized that when the Jewish religious and political leaders talked about faith, they were not talking about the same kind of faith that Jesus was. For Jesus' faith, that's not the faith he had. It means in his teaching, faith is the commitment of one's real self, completely and totally to the Father. For the Jewish religious and political leaders of the day, it was far less than that commitment of one's real self to the covenant God. And it allowed them a lot of what I call wiggle room. That is, they could wiggle around and miss the point. That's the reason they could stay such hypocrites, so indifferent in the matter of compassion. They could claim faith, but it had little to do with serving God. Jesus commended the faith of the centurion as being what their common Father desired them to have. It is also the kind of faith the Father desired for his covenant people, and which the Jewish religious and political leaders conspicuously lacked. And then, and I can remember as a child listening to Bible class teachers and preachers, and they would just vehemently deny that somebody else could have faith and it would save somebody else. It says so right here. His faith was rewarded. His servant was healed. So if preachers say one thing, the text says another. Stay with the text. Jesus heals Benny. Matthew 8:14 through 17. This event occurred in Capernaum, and by quoting from Isaiah 53:4, Matthew intended for his readers to perceive Jesus as the promised Messianic King whose suffering would bring healing to all diseases of all the nations. That's probably just about all that Matthew intended for us to get out of that short pericope. The cost of following Jesus. Matthew 8:18 through 23. And the crowds of people became so great that they pushed his listeners into the sea. Now, there's at least two possibilities. It could have been that Jesus was in a boat close to the shore. The crowd were pushing the people into the sea. Could be they were all on ships. Anyway, they were being shoved into the sea. Jesus ordered his followers to cross back over the sea. That phrase makes it highly probable that they were all in boats. And so he ordered them to return to the other side of the sea. As these things were happening, one of those authorized to interpret the law indicated his desire to follow Jesus. Despite the fact that he was the promised suffering Messianic king, he did not even have a place where he could meet and instruct his followers. This is not some generalized statement. It is a statement of fact. He didn't even have a home of his own in which to instruct his followers. The followers of Jesus, both then and now, must be willing to accept this paradox. The would-be follower asks for time to perform an important religious act, namely mourning the death of a parent. The meaning of Jesus' closing statement is very difficult, to say the least. Recently read an article that may shed some light on it, but neither the man who wrote the article nor I have enough information to settle the problem. Jesus calms the storm. Matthew 8:23 through 27. Matthew intends for his readers to perceive this narrative as a straightforward demonstration of the divine creative power of Jesus. After all, he was part of the Godhead, created the universe, and while he was on earth, he had that power to control the universe. And the healing of 2 demon-possessed men, Matthew 8:28 through 34. With this closing pericope, Matthew has painted a complete picture of the power, the majesty, the self-revelation of Jesus' conception of the teaching and work of the Messianic King. If you ever want to have a summary of what it means to be the Messianic King on earth, read chapter 8 of Matthew. Thank you, and have a good day.